there are many of us who believe that we as a people have progressed, that we are really further along than we were with slavery. You see? And of course we can talk about the few things that we do. We talk about, they're not mentioning us anymore, and they're not, they don't have us in chattel slavery anymore. That's nice. And of course now we have increased opportunity. And we like to talk about the specialties that we're in. We go to various colleges now, and we're computer technologists, and we're, this and we're that. And yet you recognize that in slavery, black people were specialists then. Yeah, every black man didn't pick cotton. Not at all. You had blacksmiths, carpenters, supervisors, domestic people, craftsmen. In fact, in certain aspects of the country, you had more skilled black people doing Reconstruction than you had whites. So the idea of blacks having skills and specialties is not new at all. It's the same old game. And for the same reason. And that reason is to maximize the profits of the master. And when we talk about getting jobs and so forth and all of our specialties, recognize it's the same ball game to maximize the profit of IBM and all the rest of these big things that we're going to work for. When I think about IBM and all these big companies, it reminds me of perhaps many blacks in slavery who got off because they worked for the big plantation. And they'd come down on the other slaves there who worked for the little plantations. So if you worked for Mr. Charlie who had 100 slaves, you felt better than the man who had 2 or 3. Being slaves, of course, just the same. And there's some of us say, we work for RPM, I work for so somehow that makes me better if you working, down the street with maybe 1 or 2 employees. But the old game is the same. Thank you very much. The old game is maximizing profits. The other part of the old game is, though, and the constants, and this is what we have to look at. You have to get beyond the obvious changes and look behind those changes. And say, well, what really has changed? And you recognize the most basic things have not changed. As a matter of fact, the apparent changes have been put in place to maintain the basic ones. You see? And I often tell people, racism is going out of style, not because the white man is better, but because he has a better weapon for maintaining his racial position. You see, the racism is being given up, not necessarily because we're so militant, that's a part of it, and not discrediting our efforts, but also because there's a recognition that overt racism is no longer necessary to maintain control of our people. As a matter of fact, it's non-racism, apparent non-racism, that is the best way of maintaining racist control. Thank you. Now, the thing you have to look at then is the power relationship. Has the power relationship between African people and Europeans changed? You see? This is the issue you must look at. Has it changed, you see? Are we, and I'd like to put it in this question, are we as Africans in any better position to defend our children and ourselves against enslavement today than our forefathers were 400 years ago? This is what you have to look at. If the Europeans today decided that they would come right here in this room and take us right into slavery, into concentration camps, or decide to remove us, can we defend ourselves? Can we defend our children? What black nation can come to our defense? Is there any African nation, another nation that can stand up and defend our rights? That has not changed, ladies and gentlemen. Despite all the African governments and all of the so-called independent movements and all the governors and mayors and all of this other stuff we've elected, the old power game is the same. Nothing has moved. Your ability to protect yourself is still vulnerable. The Europeans have meetings at Helsinki, right? And they have meetings at this. And of course, we're never told, of course, that you have the superficial meeting and then you have the secret ones that you don't hear about. And these are the ones, so that you get a lot of publicity about the surface stuff. But what are the Europeans discussing in those chambers that didn't get out to us? I could see, often you may wonder if Andropov and Reagan are just playing games with the world. You know, let's play warlike, and this way we can put up our people to do anything we want them to do. Right? The Russians feel threatened, you can get the Russians to do what, and you can get them in armies and droves. If you whip up a fear about the United States, people will sacrifice money, time, lives, limbs, and everything to the cause. Fall in line. The same thing in this country. So what do? Let's just keep up noise, and this way we control. What about one day Andropov and Reagan meet and say, we're tired of these Africans. Why do we have to even, we're not giving them anything anyway. But why should we even put up with them? What do we need them for? You know, back, in the 70s there was a discussion of triage, right? Lifeboat ethics. The whole issue of the debate is they're concerned whether we should just let some nations completely fade away and die, based on the idea that a lifeboat only has so much space for so many people, and if you have a bunch of people floating around in the water, you have to make a decision who you're going to let in the boat and who's going to have to stay out and drown. And if you look at Earth as a lifeboat that can only contain so much life and can only support so many people, particularly if you're looking at it on the level of a style of life, where some people on this boat want to maintain a very high style of life and don't want to give it up, so therefore share with other people, this becomes, and maybe we should let these nations just fade away and die and forget about it. And it's based on the issue of who can contribute to our progress or not. And naturally look around at our nations and begin to wonder, why should we carry these people along? And so Andropov and Reagan can even say, well, let's get rid of these people. Why should we keep them? Of course, we know that the neutron bomb was developed for the third world. Even though they try to deceive you and try to say, oh, we're developing this bomb because the Russians have more tanks than us in Eastern Europe, and this way we can get over their tank superiority, But of course, when you read the account of the guy who developed the neutron bomb, it was obvious that the neutron bomb was developed for the third world, to be used against the third world, so-called. Most beautifully over the Arab countries, because it succeeds in doing what? Blowing the Arabs away and leaving the oil well standing. Leaving the infrastructure, the fuel infrastructure there, while ridding the land of its people. Why couldn't that be, of course, applied to the rest of the African continent? You see? This is the kind of world, you see, that our children, and the kind of possibilities that our children must face. And these are the kinds of possibilities that they must be prepared to handle. And this is why the education of our children, you see, can't even be the same education. Because we're not preparing for the same thing these other people are preparing for. And this is the reason why education in the black community should be very, deadly, deadly serious at this point, you see. So this constancy, and the European, despite all of the appearances, is going to try to maintain power. We're going to change the appearances to maintain that power. When I speak before many black college audiences, I tell them up front that, of course, you're here to become the black face that's going to be put on white power. That black educated elite, that's its major function, is to confuse the black masses and to deceive these masses into thinking that we actually are sharing in the power and that we actually have some real stake in the society. The same way we, of course, we have in the neo-colonial tradition. To put in front of the people neo-colonialist leaders whose economies and whose lifelines are still controlled by Europeans. To deceive the African masses into thinking that independence actually exists. So when there is unrest, they will attack the puppet. And yet the European will continue to extract the wealth from the countries. How does he get out of Africa? Then he gets out of Africa because it becomes cheaper to put these puppets up in front of the people than it does for him to stay there with a whole set of troops. So his appearance appears to get better. It's just another part of the game. These Europeans have found, for instance, that they could, we hear some of our countries say, well, in order to go into business, the national, the country itself has to own at least 50% or 51% of whatever industry comes into it. And that sounds very nice and sweet, doesn't it? So we can go into many of our African countries, other countries, third world countries, and you can say, well, the government owns part of this. But it's a charade. What does it mean to own it? Basically, it means just to own the trouble that's going to come out of it. How's it happen? The European has found that he can make as much money or more money by owning 25% of a company than he could by owning the whole thing. Because he's going to supply quite often the so-called management. You can own it, but I'm going to run it. And he pays his managers tremendous salary, so he still robs the country, even though it's nominally under your control. Not only does he do that, he still sells the parts and the industrial parts and technology that must go into that company. And he will sell those parts and that technology at exorbitant prices, and will deliver them when he feels like it, if he feels like it or not, or he can keep the company that you own the majority in technologically behind other countries as such. So then when the workers go on strike and so forth, they strike against the government or strike against the apparent owners of the industry, and that government fights and beats those strikers down and so forth, and the European still there sucks the money out. So the apparent lack of racism, ladies and gentlemen, see, it's this kind of intelligence that a black education must get us into, so that we can look beyond appearances.
I'm curious about taking people from one part of the world and bringing them to a new world and getting them to work. And it seems to me, and I don't feel like a lot of people really think about this when they think of slavery, is it seems to me to some extent you would have to be taking skilled labor from some places.
Yes.
In order to, benefit from the, say, the crops you're growing. For example, yes. You may take people from, say, a rice-growing region of West Africa, put them in a area in the New World that's ripe for growing rice, and utilize those people's skills to help you profit.
Well, yes. There's a book called Black Rice by a UCLA historian that makes that precise point,
right,
with regard to taking Africans from a certain part of West Africa where there's rice growing, and taking them to South Carolina. And of course, on the one hand, you have slave traders who would just go willy-nilly into Africa, and with the maniacal energy of crazed bees would handcuff and manacle every African in sight and throw them on a slave ship. Then you had slave traders who were much more targeted and precise. They would look for Africans with certain skills, for example. It would be as if China, in some sort of science fiction, would come to the west coast of North America, and they say, look, I think we're going to avoid Compton and South Central Los Angeles, and we're going to go to Silicon Valley and snatch all the engineers. And then we'll sail up the coast to Seattle and go to the Amazon and Microsoft building and snatch everybody there. And then sail across the Pacific and put these people to work in China. Well, in some senses, that's what happened with regard to people sailing from the Atlantic coast of North America into Africa. Not only West Africa, but as some of my research has shown, East Africa as well.
Yeah, I really don't hear much about East Africa, such as what countries in East Africa?
Oh, Mozambique.
Mozambique. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
For example, it's known, first of all, Zanzibar, which is part of Tanzania now, it's off the southeastern coast of Africa, was once the Kmart, or to put it in your terms, the Walmart of the African slave trade. And the U.S. slave traders were the preeminent force in Zanzibar as early as the 1840s, for example.